My parents yelled, "You did this, take responsibility," after their store burned to the ground. Even my girlfriend backed them, so I replied I didn't know how the fire started, but I could smell an insurance scam from miles away. I'm 26 male, grew up as the invisible second son in a family where my older brother Marcus, 29 male, was basically treated like royalty. You know those families where one kid can do no wrong and everyone else just exists to support that kid's narrative? Yeah, that was my childhood in a nutshell. I was the forgotten son, the afterthought, the one who existed just to make Marcus look better by comparison. Growing up in the Palmer household was like being extra in someone else's movie. Marcus was always the successful one in my parents' eyes, not because he actually accomplished anything remarkable, but because he had this gift for talking himself up while doing the bare minimum. The guy could fail a test and somehow convince my parents he was victimized by a biased teacher. He could crash a car and make it sound like he was the hero who survived a dangerous situation. He could show up late to everything and still be praised for making it work. Meanwhile, I'd bring home straight A's and get told I needed to apply myself more like Marcus supposedly did. I'd work my butt off at extracurriculars and barely get a nod of acknowledgement. I'd help around the house without being asked and receive nothing but criticism about what I did wrong. Let me paint you a detailed picture of what life was like. When Marcus was 16, he crashed my dad's truck into a mailbox while texting. Not just a little bump either. He completely demolished the mailbox, cracked the truck's bumper, and knocked out a headlight. My parents' response: they bought him his own car within a month because he needed to learn responsibility with his own vehicle. Their logic was that if he had his own car, he'd take better care of it. Spoiler alert, he did not. He wrecked that car too within 8 months. When I was 16, I got a part-time job bagging groceries at the local supermarket. I worked every weekend and 3 evenings a week during the school year. I saved every single paycheck for 2 years to buy a beat-up Honda Civic with 180,000 MI on it. My parents' contribution $0. Their response when I drove it home: just don't expect us to pay for the insurance or gas. You have a job now. Meanwhile, they were still paying for Marcus's insurance even though he was 19 and had totaled 1 vehicle already. The favoritism went beyond just material things. It was woven into every aspect of our family dynamic. Every conversation revolved around Marcus. Every family gathering centered on his achievements, no matter how minor. Every holiday was a celebration of whatever Marcus was doing at the time. Christmas was always a Marcus celebration with me as an afterthought. I still remember this one Christmas when I was 14. Marcus's pile of presents was stacked so high it looked like a store display. New gaming console, latest games designer clothes, and expensive watch gift cards worth hundreds of dollars. My pile: 4 packages. A sweater 2 sizes too big, a pack of socks, a gift card for the grocery store where I worked. Real creative mom. And a copy of some self-help book about reaching your potential. Nothing I'd asked for. Nothing that showed they knew anything about my actual interests or hobbies. When I looked disappointed, Mom just said Marcus is graduating soon. He needs things for his future. Never mind that I was also a high school student with my own future to think about. Never mind that I'd given her an actual list of things I wanted most, of which were cheaper than the stuff Marcus got. The double standards extended to everything. When Marcus got a D in calculus, my parents hired him a tutor, blamed the teacher, and eventually got the grade changed through a series of complaints to the principal. When I got a B+ in advanced placement history, my dad said he was disappointed and asked why I wasn't trying harder. A B+ apparently showed a lack of effort, while a D deserved sympathy and support. When Marcus stayed out past curfew, my parents assumed he was just having fun with friends and told him to text next time. When I came home 15 minutes late from my job because my manager asked me to stay and help close, I got grounded for a week. Apparently work wasn't a valid excuse, but Marcus's social life was sacred and untouchable. I still remember this one time in 10th grade when both of us had events on the same Saturday. Marcus had a basketball game, just a regular season game, nothing special. I had the regional finals for the academic decathlon, something I'd been working toward for months. Guess which one my parents attended? They didn't even pretend to be torn about it. Mom just said Marcus needs the support more. You'll do fine on your own. I won first place in my category. They found out 3 days later when a neighbor congratulated them. The message was clear from early on. Marcus mattered and I was just there to fill space. Any achievement of mine was met with indifference or criticism, while Marcus's bare minimum efforts got standing ovations. After a while, I just stopped sharing things with them. What was the point? Marcus coasted through college on our parents' dime changing majors 3 times and taking 6.5 years to graduate with a business degree he's never actually used for anything. He failed classes, retook courses, and generally treated higher education like an extended vacation. My parents paid every penny of his tuition, bought him a car for campus, gave him spending money, and covered his apartment rent. I worked 2 jobs while taking a full course load. I had a scholarship that covered most of my tuition, but I still had to pay for books, food, and my share of a cramped apartment with 3 roommates. I graduated in 4 years with honors in accounting and a job offer from a regional firm. My parents' response to my graduation: a single congratulatory text from my mom: congrats. Don't forget Marcus's birthday dinner is Saturday. That's it. No card, no present, no celebration dinner. Just a reminder to show up for Marcus. By the time I was 22 and starting my career at the accounting firm, I'd pretty much accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I was the reliable one, the one they called when they needed something done right, the one who'd show up when asked and never complain. But I was never the one they celebrated or prioritized. Now here's where my parents' business comes into the picture, and this is important for understanding why they eventually tried to destroy my life. About 15 years ago, my dad opened Palmer's Hardware and Home Supply, a medium-sized hardware store in our town. It started small, just my dad and 2 employees in a cramped storefront. But over the years, it grew steadily. They moved to a bigger location, hired more staff, expanded into home improvement supplies and seasonal items. By the time I finished college, I had become a fixture in the community. The business was my grandfather's dream originally. Grandpa Palmer had worked in construction his whole life and always wanted to open a hardware store where working folks could get quality tools and honest advice. When he passed, he left my dad enough money to finally make that dream happen. Dad named it Palmer's Hardware in honor of Grandpa. My parents never really involved me in the business despite my obvious qualification. Marcus was always their chosen successor, even though he showed zero interest in actually working. He had some vague title like operations consultant, which basically meant he showed up when he felt like it, made grand pronouncements about things he didn't understand, and collected a salary for doing nothing of substance. I offered to help with their books multiple times over the years. I was literally an accountant with expertise in small business finances. I could have reviewed their systems, optimized their tax situation, helped them with budgeting and forecasting identified problems before they became disasters. But my dad always waved me off with, "We've got it handled. Don't worry about it." Or Marcus is taking care of that side of things. One time I actually sat down and showed my dad a basic cash flow analysis I'd put together based on publicly available information about the store. I pointed out some concerning trends, suggested some changes that could improve their margins. He looked at it for maybe 30 seconds, said interesting, and then changed the subject to something Marcus was doing. Never mentioned it again. That analysis would have shown them they were heading for trouble 2 years before it became a crisis. But what did I know? I was just an actual financial professional. Marcus taking care of the finances was like putting a toddler in charge of air traffic control. The guy couldn't balance a checkbook, let alone manage a small business's accounts. He'd approve orders without checking inventory, give discounts to his friends without tracking them, and generally treat the store like his personal piggy bank. But in my parents' eyes, he could do no wrong. So clearly he was the right choice to manage their livelihood. About 4 years ago, I met Brianna at a friend's birthday party. She was beautiful with this laugh that made you feel like you were the funniest person in the room, smart, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. After years of being overlooked by my own family, having someone actually see me felt incredible. We started dating and everything seemed perfect. She was supportive of my career, encouraged my hobbies, and actually listened when I talked about my life. She remembered things I told her, asked follow-up questions, seemed genuinely invested in my success. She said all the right things about my family situation. When I'd tell her about the latest example of Marcus's favoritism, she'd shake her head and say, "You deserve so much better. They don't appreciate what they have." She'd come to my work events and charm my colleagues. She'd plan thoughtful dates and surprise me with little gifts that showed she was paying attention. On my birthday, she threw me an actual party with friends, something my own family had never bothered to do. I thought I'd finally found someone who valued me the way I deserved to be valued. Looking back now, I realize she was gathering information the whole time. Every complaint I made about my family, every detail about my finances, every frustration I expressed about being overlooked, she was filing away for later use. She was building a profile of me, my vulnerabilities, my relationship with my family. She knew exactly which buttons to push because I'd shown her where all the buttons were. But I didn't see that then. We moved in together after about a year of dating, got a nice apartment on the better side of town, split expenses, played house like a normal couple. I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. I even started thinking about proposing, looking at rings during my lunch breaks, imagining what our future might look like together. Brianna had been spending more time with my family over the past year or so. She'd go to family dinners even when I couldn't make it due to work deadlines. She'd visit my mom for coffee, help her with errands, build her own relationship independent of me. I thought it was sweet. I thought she was trying to bridge the gap between me and my family. What I didn't know was that she was also building different kind of relationship with Marcus, and it wasn't the sibling-in-law variety. About 8 months before everything blew up, I started noticing some weird things. Little inconsistencies that didn't add up on their own, but created a pattern when you looked at them together. Brianna became more secretive with her phone. She'd angle the screen away from me while texting, step out of the room to take calls, and claim it was work stuff even on weekends when her office was closed. She started going to the gym at odd hours, coming home at 10:00 p.m., claiming she'd done an evening spin class even though she'd never shown interest in spinning before. Then there were the changes with my family interactions. My mom started inviting Brianna to things without including me. "Oh, you're working late? That's fine. Brianna can still come to dinner. Marcus was suddenly very interested in our relationship, asking pointed questions about how things were going, whether we were happy, whether I was treating her well enough. The first real alarm bell came about 6 months ago. A client meeting canceled unexpectedly on a Saturday afternoon, so I figured I'd surprise Brianna. She told me she was visiting her sister who lived about 2 hours away. But on a whim, I stopped by my parents' house first to grab a tool I'd lent my dad months earlier. Her car was in my parents' driveway. When I walked in through the back door like I always did, I found her and Marcus sitting very close together on the couch in the living room. They jumped apart when they saw me. That guilty flinch that people do when they're caught doing something wrong. "What are you doing here?" Brianna asked. And the way she said it, like I was the one who didn't belong, should have told me everything. She claimed she changed her plans last minute and decided to visit my mom instead of driving all the way to her sister's. Marcus said he was just there for lunch. My mom appeared from the kitchen and backed them up with this tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Everything felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I wanted to believe them. Desperately wanted to believe them, actually. The alternative was too painful to consider, so I swallowed my suspicions and let it go. Big mistake. Huge. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to everything. The late nights became more frequent. The secretive texts continued. The way Brianna would tense up whenever Marcus's name came up in conversation. I started piecing together a picture I really didn't want to see. Then one Thursday night, about 4 months ago, I did something I'm not proud of. Brianna left her phone unlocked on the nightstand while she was in the shower, and after weeks of growing suspicion, I finally looked. What I found made my stomach drop into my feet. Months of texts between her and Marcus. Romantic texts, explicit texts, plans for their future together once they handled things with me. Declarations of love, inside jokes, discussions about how they couldn't wait to be together openly. But worse than the affair was what else I found. Conversations with my parents about some kind of plan involving the store. Messages like, "Once the insurance pays out, we'll have enough to start fresh. And he won't suspect anything. He's too trusting. And this will solve all our problems." I took screenshots of everything, sent them to my personal email, then deleted the email from my sent folder, put the phone back exactly where I found it, screen down just like she'd left it. Then I sat there in the dark bedroom listening to the shower run, processing the fact that my girlfriend, my brother, and apparently my parents were all conspiring against me for something involving insurance money. The smart thing wouldn't have been to confront them immediately, maybe, but something told me I didn't have the full picture yet. If I tipped my hand too early, they might adjust their plans, cover their tracks, find a new way to do whatever they were planning. So I made a decision that went against every instinct I had. I waited, watched, gathered more information. Over the next 3 weeks, I played the role of the clueless boyfriend and overlooked son perfectly. I smiled at Brianna, made small talk with Marcus when he came around, visited my parents for Sunday dinners, like nothing was wrong. But I was listening to everything, watching their body language, paying attention to who was texting whom and when. I also started doing some digging on my own. Through some public records searches and conversations with an old classmate who worked at the local bank, I pieced together a disturbing picture. Palmer's Hardware wasn't just struggling, it was drowning in debt. Years of Marcus's incompetent management had run it into the ground. They'd taken out loans, maxed out credit lines, and were facing foreclosure on the building within 6 months. I pulled the county records on the property, 3 liens. I checked the state database for UCC filings, multiple secured creditors. I even drove by the store a few times during business hours, counting customers, watching the flow of traffic. The place was practically empty most days. Whatever my parents were telling people about how well the business was doing, the numbers told a very different story. Instead of asking me, their son, the accountant, for help with their failing business, they decided on a different solution: insurance fraud. Here's what I figured out from the texts and from overhearing fragments of conversations over those weeks. They planned to burn down the store and claim it was arson committed by an outside party. The insurance payout would cover their debts and leave them with enough money to start over. Clean slate, fresh start, no consequences. They'd even talked about using some of the money to help Marcus and Brianna relocate somewhere warmer, maybe Florida or Arizona. But arson investigations are thorough. Insurance companies don't just hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars without asking questions. They send investigators, hire forensic experts, look for inconsistencies in stories. They'd need someone to blame, someone to take the fall. Someone whose motive would satisfy investigators and let them collect their money without too much scrutiny. Guess who they'd picked as their scapegoat? The son they'd been ignoring and belittling for 26 years. Me. The plan was actually pretty elaborate for a family of idiots who couldn't run a hardware store. They'd been setting me up for months, and I'd been too focused on the Brianna situation to notice. Apparently, my dad had been telling employees at the store that I was angry about being cut out of the family business. He'd mentioned to suppliers that his younger son had resentment issue and had made vague threats about the store. My mom had been dropping hints to relatives that I'd been acting erratically lately and making concerning comments about feeling undervalued. Marcus had been feeding Brianna specific lines to use against me if anyone asked about my mental state. They were building a narrative painting me as the bitter, overlooked son who finally snapped and took revenge on the family business that had rejected him. Brianna's role was multifaceted. She was supposed to provide an alibi for Marcus the night of the fire. They were planning to claim they'd been at a concert together in another city. She was going to discover fake evidence pointing to me, something they'd plant in our apartment. And after the insurance paid out and I was facing criminal charges, she and Marcus would disappear together, with their share of the money leaving me to rot. The night they chose to execute their plan was a Thursday, about 3 weeks after I first discovered the texts. Marcus was supposed to be at some business conference 3 hours away with Brianna as his assistant. My parents were visiting my aunt an hour in the opposite direction, establishing their own alibi. And me, I was supposed to be home alone in our apartment with no one to verify my whereabouts. Except I wasn't the gullible idiot they thought I was. Not anymore. The day before their planned arson, I went to the police. Walked into the station with a folder full of evidence and asked to speak with someone about preventing a crime. The desk sergeant looked at me like I was crazy until I started explaining what I had. The detective they assigned me was named Detective Shaw, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who looked like she'd seen everything. She listened to my whole story without interrupting, reviewed the screenshots I'd printed, examined the timeline I'd put together. "Let me get this straight," she said when I finished leaning back in her chair. "Your parents, your brother, and your girlfriend are planning to commit arson at your family's business tomorrow night, and they're going to frame you for it to collect insurance money." "Yes, ma'am. I know it sounds insane, but look at these texts." She spent a long time reading through everything. Her expression didn't change much, but I saw her eyebrows go up a few times at particularly damning messages. "This is pretty explicit," she finally said. "They really discussed this over text. They're not exactly criminal masterminds." She almost smiled at that. "No, I guess not." She was quiet for another minute reading. "And you're sure about the timeline tomorrow night based on the messages and some conversations I overheard?" "Yes. They've been planning this for months, but the actual arson is supposed to happen tomorrow between 200 and 300 a.m. Detective Shaw looked at me for a long moment like she was trying to decide if I was legitimate or some kind of crank. Whatever she saw in my face must have convinced her. "Okay," she said. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get authorization to have officers monitor the store tomorrow night. We'll have units in the area. If this goes down the way you say, we'll catch them in the act." That night, I went to a hotel downtown, paid cash for the room, so there'd be no credit card trail. I wasn't taking any chances with my whereabouts. The room had a TV, a bed, and a window overlooking the city. I sat there watching late-night shows without really seeing them, waiting for my phone to ring, hoping I was right, and also hoping I was wrong. At 2:47 a.m., my phone rang. "Mr. Palmer," Detective Shaw's voice was tight with controlled excitement. "You were right. We caught them." The relief that washed over me was physical. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. She explained what happened. Marcus and another man, some friend of his, had shown up at the store around 2:15 a.m. with containers of accelerant. They'd disabled what they thought was the only security camera and started the fire in the back stockroom. What they didn't know was that officers were watching from unmarked vehicles nearby. The cops moved in the moment they saw flames, and the fire department arrived within minutes. The fire was contained to the stockroom and part of the back office before it could spread to the main retail floor. They arrested Marcus and his buddy at the scene, caught red-handed with accelerant on their clothes and lighters in their pockets. The building was damaged, but not destroyed. Insurance investigators would later determine the fire was definitely arson, and the security footage made it clear who was responsible. "There's more," Detective Shaw continued. "We've also brought in your parents for questioning. They were at your aunt's house like you said, but when we contacted them about the arrest, your father's reaction was telling. He immediately started making excuses for your brother before we even told him what the charges were. And there's a woman here claiming to be your girlfriend who was waiting in a car about 2 blocks from the store. She's asking for a lawyer. Brianna, of course she was there. Couldn't even let Marcus commit a felony without being nearby for moral support." The next few hours were a blur. I went to the police station, gave a formal statement, provided all my evidence officially. I watched through a window as the people I'd trusted most in this world were processed one by one. My dad in handcuffs, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. My mom crying and claiming she didn't know anything, her makeup running down her face. Marcus looking stunned like he couldn't believe this was actually happening to him. The golden child who'd never faced a consequence in his life. Brianna Mascara streaked and demanding to speak with someone in charge, still trying to manipulate her way out of the situation. My dad tried to spot me through the window at one point. When our eyes met, he started shouting something, but I couldn't hear through the glass. I didn't need to hear it. Whatever excuse or plea he was making, I didn't want to know. My parents tried the concerned parent act at first during their interrogations, claimed they had no idea what Marcus was planning, that they were just as shocked as anyone, that there must be some misunderstanding. That lasted about 10 minutes until detectives showed them the text messages I'd provided. The ones where my mom discussed the timeline of the plan in detail. The ones where my dad calculated exactly how much the insurance would pay out. The ones where they talked about how I'd never see it coming. My father actually looked at the camera during his interrogation and said he was never going to amount to anything anyway. At least this way, he'd serve some purpose. Detective Shaw showed me that clip later. Said she'd seen a lot of terrible parents in her career, but that one stuck with her. The evidence against all of them was overwhelming. And here's the beautiful part. The thing that really sealed their fate. My parents made one critical error in their genius plan. They forgot about the store's security cameras. A few years back, when they upgraded the security system, they thought they'd set it to only record locally, delete after 30 days. No cloud backup, nice and private. But they'd messed up the configuration. The system had been quietly uploading everything to a cloud server the entire time. Every recording automatically backed up, stored for 2 years. Every conversation they had in the back office planning this scheme was recorded. Every time Marcus and Brianna met at the store to coordinate, details captured on video. Every piece of their conspiracy documented and automatically uploaded to a server they didn't even know existed. The investigators found months of footage. My parents huddled in the back office, literally drawing diagrams of how they'd make the fire look like arson committed by me. Marcus and Brianna's romantic encounters in the stockroom between planning sessions. My father practicing what he'd say to insurance adjusters. My mother researched signs of arson on the office computer, presumably, so they could avoid leaving those signs. It was like they'd filmed their own true crime documentary and then handed it to the prosecutors. On top of the video evidence, there were the texts, emails, and bank records showing money transfers between all of them as they prepared for their new life. There were web searches on my dad's computer for how insurance fraud investigations work and arson detection methods and signs of accelerant use. They'd literally created a digital paper trail of their own crime. The case was so solid that the district attorney called it one of the clearest cases of conspiracy he'd seen in 20 years on the job. They documented their own crime, he told me during one of our meetings, every step of the way. It's like they wanted to get caught. The charges were extensive and serious. For my parents' first-degree arson, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit a felony, and filing false reports. They'd already started paperwork blaming me before getting caught. For Marcus, all of the above, plus obstruction of justice for trying to delete texts from his phone when he saw the police approaching. For Brianna, conspiracy accessory to arson and fraud. The legal process took about 10 months from arrest to sentencing. During that time, I moved out of the apartment Brianna and I had shared, found a small one-bedroom place across town, and threw myself into work. The criminal trials happened in February. I was there every day, sitting in the gallery watching the people who'd betrayed me face consequences for the first time in their privileged lives. The courtroom became almost routine after the first few days. Same seats, same bailiff, same court reporter, different witnesses, different evidence, but the same overwhelming proof of what they'd done. My dad tried to maintain his dignity throughout the proceedings, wearing suits, sitting up straight, acting like this was all just a misunderstanding that would be cleared up by reasonable people. He had this look on his face like he still expected someone to step in and fix everything for him the way things had always worked out before. That facade cracked hard when the prosecutor played the security footage of him explaining to Marcus exactly how they'd make me look guilty. In the video, my dad was laughing, actually laughing, while explaining how my years of being overlooked would make me a believable suspect. He joked about how I'd never see it coming because I was too busy being the responsible son to notice anything. He talked about how my resentment toward the family, the resentment they'd created through years of favoritism, would make me the perfect fall guy. The jury watched. 12 people who'd never met me saw exactly what kind of father I'd grown up with. Several of them glanced over at me with something like sympathy in their eyes. His attorney asked for a recess after that footage played. My dad looked like he wanted to throw up. When they came back, he couldn't make eye contact with anyone. My mom cried through most of her testimony, playing the victim card as hard as she could. She claimed my dad had pressured her, that she was just trying to save the family business, that she never wanted to hurt me, that she didn't understand the full scope of what they were planning. She actually said at one point that she always loved both her sons equally. Several people in the gallery audibly scoffed at that one. The prosecutor destroyed her on cross-examination, showed texts where she suggested specific ways to plant evidence in my apartment, showed messages where she coached Brianna on exactly what to say to police, showed video of her researching how to make the fire look like amateur arson, the kind an angry son might commit, showed her web search history, how to gaslight someone, making someone look unstable, signs of mental breakdown. The crying stopped after that. She just looked defeated. Her attorney didn't even try to redirect. Marcus threw everyone under the bus in his own trial. His defense strategy was basically, I'm too stupid to have planned this myself, which fair point. But he was still the one who showed up at the store with gasoline and matches at 2:00 a.m. The jury didn't buy the dumb act, especially after they saw texts where he bragged to Brianna about how he'd finally be rid of his loser brother once the plan worked. Brianna's trial was separate. Her defense was that she'd been manipulated by Marcus, that she was a victim of romantic coercion. It might have worked if there wasn't video evidence of her actively participating in planning meetings, initiating conversations about specific details of the scheme, and generally being just as guilty as everyone else. She got convicted on all counts. The sentencing was satisfying. My dad got 8 years in state prison. My mom got 6 years. Marcus got 7 years plus 5 years probation after release. Brianna got 4 years. When the judge read out my father's sentence, I watched his face go completely white. He looked at me from the defendant's table with desperate eyes and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I stared back without expression and slowly shook my head. While the criminal case was pending, I did something my parents never expected. I sued them. With the help of a civil attorney named Tom Patterson, I filed a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress conspiracy to deprive me of liberty and defamation. My parents had spent months telling people I was unstable, that I'd made threats against the family business, all to set up their frame job. Those lies had spread through our community, damaged my reputation, and could have destroyed my career if things had gone differently. Tom walked me through every element of the case. The emotional distress claim was obvious, given that my own family had conspired to send me to prison. The conspiracy charge was documented in thousands of text messages. And the defamation. We had witnesses who'd heard my parents spreading lies about my mental state, suppliers who'd been told I was dangerous, employees who'd been warned to watch out for me. The civil suit also targeted the family business directly. When my parents started Palmer's Hardware 15 years ago, my grandfather had invested the startup capital. As part of that investment, there was a clause in the original partnership agreement. If any partner was convicted of a crime involving fraud against the business, their shares would be automatically forfeit. My grandfather had insisted on that clause. He'd seen too many family businesses destroyed by one member's greed or stupidity, and he wanted protection built in. My parents had complained about it at the time, apparently, but eventually agreed because they needed his money. They'd never bothered to remove that clause when Grandpa passed away. Probably forgot it even existed, buried in legal documents they never read. But their conviction for attempting to defraud the insurance company triggered it. And since I was Grandpa's surviving heir from that line of the family, and he'd included me in the original partnership documents as a contingent beneficiary, I had a claim to those forfeited shares. Grandpa had specifically added that provision according to his old attorney who I tracked down. He'd told the lawyer that he wanted to make sure the good one was protected if anything ever happened. Tom absolutely loved this case. They literally gave you the legal weapon to take everything from them, he said. Your grandfather saw who they really were and he planned for it. It's poetic justice. The civil case wrapped up about 2 months after the criminal convictions. With my parents facing prison and their assets frozen, they couldn't mount much of a defense. The judgment went entirely in my favor. Between the partnership clause and the civil damages, I ended up with full ownership of Palmer's Hardware and Home Supply. The very business my parents had tried to burn down to frame me now belonged entirely to me. When their attorney called to discuss the final settlement details, my dad apparently got on the phone to make one last plea. "It's your family legacy," he said. "Your grandfather started that business. You can't just take it from us." "Grandpa would have wanted me to have it," I replied. "You tried to destroy me. I'm just returning the favor." I hung up and never spoke to him again. The store was in rough shape after the fire and years of Marcus's management, but it wasn't beyond saving. The insurance company paid out for the fire damage, ironically enough, since my family wasn't the one filing the claim anymore. I used those funds plus some of the civil judgment money to do a complete renovation of the damaged section. Brought in a consultant to assess the business side, then started making changes. First, I let go of everyone who'd been complicit in my parents' scheme. A couple of employees knew something was going on and had kept quiet. They were gone within a week. I kept the honest workers who'd just been doing their jobs, gave them raises, and promoted a longtime manager named Rita to handle day-to-day operations. Then, I restructured everything, renegotiated supplier contracts, updated the inventory management system, implemented actual financial controls and reporting. The kinds of basic business practices that should have been in place years ago. Within 6 months, Palmer's Hardware went from hemorrhaging money to turning a modest profit. Within a year, we were actually doing well. I hired 3 new employees, expanded our tool rental program, and started a contractor loyalty program that brought in steady commercial business. Last month, I officially renamed it. Palmer's Hardware is now Palmer & Sons, with a new sign out front. I put up a photo of my grandfather near the register with a small plaque explaining that he founded the original dream. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from the state prison. My dad wanted to add me to his approved visitor list. I declined. A week after that, a letter arrived from my mom. 4 pages of apologies and promises to make things right when she got out. I fed it through the shredder without finishing the first page. Marcus apparently tried to call me from county lockup 3 times before his transfer to state prison. I blocked the number after the first attempt. Brianna's mother reached out through Facebook asking if I could find it in my heart to forgive her daughter. I blocked her too. My Uncle Pete, my dad's brother, who'd always been the family black sheep, drove down to visit last month. We walked through the store together, and he told me stories about my grandfather I'd never heard. How Grandpa always worried that my dad was taking shortcuts. How he'd specifically mentioned me in his will, because he wanted to make sure I was taken care of if anything happened. "He saw what your parents were doing to you," Pete said. "He told me once that you were the only one in that house with any integrity." Guess he was right. Pete's been helping me with the store on weekends. Turns out he knows a lot about hardware from his years in construction. We're talking about making him a minority partner if things keep going well. I'm dating someone new. Her name is Rachel, works at the coffee shop down the street from the store. We've been seeing each other for about 3 months now. She knows the broad strokes of what happened with my family, doesn't treat me like damaged goods. We're taking it slow, which is fine by me. The store had its best quarter ever last month. I hired another full-time employee, and we're looking at expanding into the empty unit next door. The landlord gave me a good deal on the lease since I've been paying rent on time. Unlike my parents, who were apparently 3 months behind when everything went down. So that's where things stand. Reddit, my parents are in prison, my brother's in prison, my ex-girlfriend's in prison. I own the business they tried to burn down to frame me, and it's actually thriving for the first time in years.